Nothing for me. Just I'm glad everybody is on the call. I think we've got a great agenda, so I think we're ready to go.
Thanks, Vicki.
Yeah, Arlene, this is Steve. So the one thing that I'd like to point out, and Vicki will talk about this later, is Pam, Vicki, Arlene, and myself talked about this idea about putting a smaller group of individuals together to really start looking at doing some analytics on some of our quality and our data and everything, and looking at how we can kind of take the quality committee to the next level. So we're looking for volunteers who are interested in doing that. We'll talk about that later. So thanks, Arlene.
Thanks, Steve. And Pam will be presenting a little bit later in the agenda. We're hoping that her PowerPoint works. I do have it minimized on the screen. We're getting a little bit of interference, so fingers crossed on that. We have a lot to go over today. So we are recording, so welcome. Pam, did you want to do the contracting update? I know.
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
All right, I will jump in here. We had a call yesterday on the contracting committee, and most of our discussion was based around the UHC contract. We have a proposal for a pay-for-performance agreement, pay-for-performance, excuse me, and we have submitted a some counter proposals. And one of the things that came out of that is right now, UHC doesn't really seem like it's willing to pay at a rate that some of our other contracts pay at. And we're not allowed to discuss payment terms here, but there is one thing that we can discuss because they are published, and that is Carolyn Roten, or you can send this to Arlene as well. But strategic healthcare really needs to know about what your average RUG score is so that we can really evaluate the payment terms that UHC is giving us against what we receive from a Medicare perspective. So I know that we asked all the contract committee members to do this, but we would just echo that it's really important that if your facility is not already done so, to send that average score so that we really make sure that the payment that we're negotiating is in alignment with the payment you get from Medicare. I'm going to pause there for a second and see if there are any questions about that. Of course, everybody's mute, aren't they? So maybe send them in the chat window as we go along to Arlene, and we can cover it at the end. On Anthem, nothing new with regard to an answer on the value program. They are still looking at all the submissions. We did get some interesting information, though, on Anthem based on their floor to sniff program. And there's going to be a date that we're following up. It's not confirmed yet. But right now, what Anthem has told us is that here are the qualifications to participate on the floor to sniff. This means that you don't have to get a pre-certification. You simply then send in within 24 hours your initial assessment. So all SNFs that are part of this program must be able to admit patients on a 24/7 basis, 365 days a year. Now, we haven't heard this one before, but they said there's a fee of $189 per year per license to participate. Hospitals do have influence on the SNFs that they want to include, but they don't have ultimate say. And the Anthem's also looking at volume and star ratings as it opens up its floor to sniff program. And
Pam, one question that has come in. It says on the average RUG score to include what time frame to average?
Can we get, since we're close, you may not have June, but why don't we do first five months of the year through May 31st? Most places should have that data relatively available.
That sounds good.
Or just do your best. If you're not that close up, send your most recent starting January 1st through whatever you've got finished. All right, so on Anthem, we'll have more information coming up on Florida SNF, but if you do have an interest in that, would you please let Arlene know so that if you don't have someone on the contracting committee, we can keep you up to date on that. No real information on MMO. We are still trying to negotiate higher rates and negotiate for many of the facilities that weren't able to get onto the Medicare Advantage plan, but they're just dragging their feet further. Aetna, if you received a termination notice, there were a few places, so just heading it out here, because you had not returned your updated credentialing, it hasn't even been a year since they credentialed, and so if you received any notices like that, again, let Arlene or Steve or Carolyn know so that they can head that off for you. And that's it on Aetna. On Buckeye, they have a pay for performance, and we should be getting first quarter results. I know it's almost the end of second quarter, but we should be getting first quarter results. They said today within 7 to 10 days for OASN to review. And so I would hope by our next call for contracting that we might be able to see something, and certainly we might be able to provide some of that data based on clinical quality on our next call. And then CareSource, please just continue to let Carolyn know of any outstanding issues. They did just recently on 6/14 send many updates back to CareSource, and they just continue to pay slowly. And so Carolyn just really wants anyone who's having trouble, she wants to know about it so that they're able to address these issues ongoing. Medigold, some more locations in the Southwest were added on 6/13. So that amendment was signed by our president, Jim Formal. It goes back for final signature to Medigold before it becomes active. And TriHealth, we have a proposal out there for an amendment, and we hear crickets. And then for Central Ohio, the COPEC, we finally got, that's a physician network, we finally got a counter and red line, and OASN will be looking at that later this week, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from them soon. And that's it.
Thanks, Pam. No other comments or questions are in the chat window, and we appreciate that update. So we're going to move on, but anyone who does think of anything, please type it in the chat window and we will read that. We're going to talk about CPMT again. I know we talk about this monthly, but a few things I want to make sure that everyone's aware of. There are 51 OASN facilities currently participating in data automation with their MDS Casper data. Those 51 facilities, we want to make sure you are aware that you still do need to put in 2 Casper measures into CPMT manually, and those are listed on the agenda. Those are the percent of residents whose ability to move independently worsened in long-term care, and the percent of short-stay residents who made improvements in function short-term skilled only. This requires maintaining the MDS files beyond the current scope of our automation for this look back prior to these assessments. There is an assessment underway regarding expanding our automation capabilities to hold these submission files for at least 6 months, and that will accommodate the calculations of these measures. So basically what we're saying is CPMT is working on this to include these two measures, but until that time, you will need to manually enter those in. Now, there are a few people, we will go over that, who are showing nulls for those two measures. I believe there's 2 facilities. I have reached out to all facilities individually this month to see how that would work rather than putting out the full report of unapproved data and nulls. And some of you have gotten back to me, but I can't stress enough that it's each facility's responsibility to go in the last week of every month to make sure they have approved their data, so they're not sitting in the unapproved data file, and to make sure they have no nulls and blanks on the null report. Now, as a courtesy, we look at this for you and we send reminders to you, but it really is a facility responsibility to make sure your data is in at 100% every month, and we appreciate that. Some of you have gotten back to us, and we have looked into those issues with CPMT to make sure there were no glitches in the system, and all have checked out okay. So if you are on the unapproved data report or the null report, you need to get that taken care of prior to July 1st, with today being the 27th. So there is an urgency on that. Most of those things are very minor and will not take you more than minutes to correct. So please take a look at that. And as we look back on the Q1 results, we do realize there are areas that we continue to need to make improvement on. I have listed the areas that we are falling short on here, and they are on the agenda. This keeps blocking out, I'm not sure, so if you keep getting a screen blocked out, I apologize. They are ER visits, skilled and long-term care. What that means is we are sending a higher amount of individuals back to the emergency room, both skilled and long-term care residents, than our benchmark. Observation skilled, we are higher than benchmark on that. Falls with major injury, 30-day unplanned readmission skilled and long-term care, and new or worsening pressure ulcer skilled. Now, we do need facilities to present information on best practices at future quality committee meetings. It would be helpful to us if you would volunteer. Otherwise, I will be reaching out to you within the next week or so to ask you to present some information. As Steve had said, we're also going to talk about here shortly, volunteers needed to form small task force to analyze these areas and develop strategies to assist facilities in their quality improvement in this area. It's really important that we work together to help all ships rise and that all facilities are able to meet these benchmarks. Now, I do want to point out something to your attention. I did have Paul work up, and I'm hoping I can pull this up. I don't know if it's going to pull up here, right here. Let's see if it'll pull up. Are you seeing a dashboard?
We can. Oh, it just changed, Arlene. We can see it.
Okay. What this is, since 51 facilities are submitting data through data automation, their results are not on the dashboard that you see in CPMT, which we will go back to. Those that are on the dashboard in CPMT are the ones that are doing the 6-month look back. So I wanted to show you how these 51 facilities are doing with the data automation. And as you will see that they are actually meeting the benchmark with falls with major injury, the high-risk pressure ulcers, the UTIs. The newer worsening pressure ulcers that we talked about have been up and down. And the short stay residents who received antipsychotic medication, that is below benchmark. Right here, long stay residents, they are meeting. short stay residents with pain they are meeting. And if we look at moderate to severe pain long-term care, meeting it this month, but it has been a little up and down. I want to show you the difference of that when we look at the dashboard. I'm hoping I can get this pulled up. Got so many things open that sometimes it interferes with that. I don't know why TripAdvisor would be on my screen, but hey, let's see if we can get that. Okay, so you should be seeing the CPMT homepage. And if we log in here under OASN, and I can send that other dashboard out to anyone who would like to have it since there's so many of you participating. So when we go to the report screen, you're going to see that the CASPER measures here are based on those who are still doing the 6-month look back. So if you look at those doing the 6-month look back, you'll see falls with major injury have not met the benchmark. UTIs, high-risk pressure ulcers are. UTIs we've improved and are doing very good the last 4 months. Here's the newer worsening pressure ulcer skilled. So I wanted to point out the fact that what you're seeing on here is related to the 6-month look back when it's related to the CASPER measures. And there is another report that you don't see on this dashboard. I'm going to talk to Paul to see if there's a way to populate both dashboards so you can see them. Otherwise, I'm going to ask him for those on a monthly basis and be able to forward that to you until that is worked out. I also want to look at right here, this is where you should be going, April 2018, to check the null report. You will see numerous facilities still on this null report with only a few days to correct this, which is 11251, 21334, 65051. Those are all measures that are from the hospitalization tracking tool. 2 facilities here who need to enter those 2 CASPER measures we talked about, 52519 and 53139. Then next on here, you'll see the payer information, 31220, 51435, 62504, did not submit their payer information, and 65051, if you're on the call, you just missed one box when you submitted that. So we really need these facilities to go in and make these corrections, and that's where you find out what you're missing and how to do it. And then if we looked at the unapproved data report, we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 facilities who have not submitted and improved their data for April. So we really need that taken care of prior to July 1st. Does anyone have any questions about that regarding CPMT, regarding the other dashboard, why they can't be compared apples to apples? One is a dropping of the files every month, one is a 6-month look back, and why Paul has created 2 different dashboards? Anyone have any questions or comments or something else we haven't thought to look at that we need to consider? I know this is relatively new, and that's why we're trying to stay on top of it. Pam, Vicki, Steve, anything?
The only thing that I would say is that it's harder to move your measure when it's a 6-month look back than when we're able to see every month's progress. So thanks for adding that report. I think that's good.
And I think that report is encouraging because we're seeing real time and we are moving the bar and we are seeing more positive results. And like I said, I can send that report out until he can get that posted. That is a brand new report. I just got it yesterday. So I actually asked for it Monday, got it yesterday, sharing it with you today because I wanted to see how we were comparing. Okay, I think we can go ahead. Vicki, if you would like to go ahead and talk about the small groups task force that we want to form.
So the real essence of this is, there's a ton of us on this call, And I think it's difficult for us to really look at our data and kind of what's driving some of those numbers in our organization. So the thought was, if we could get a small task force of the quality committee that would take the data and say, okay, you know, we're having problems as an organization with 30-day hospital readmission. We know some facilities are doing very well, others are not hitting the benchmark. But if we can figure out why we're not hitting the benchmark and why some are, then maybe we can share some of those best practices to bring up the ones that are struggling to the benchmark. But the only way we're going to do that is if we can really figure out what's driving it. So, you know, is it that docs are just sending people? Is it that families are putting in pressure? Is it that, you know, the facilities don't feel that they've got some of the tools that they need? I just think if we can get more information, then we have a better chance of helping everyone meet benchmark or exceed benchmark. So we're looking for volunteers, and I know we ask everybody for so much, and we already take a lot of your time between the calls and the data entry. But I think as a group, if we are really going to be successful, and especially as we enter more and more pay-for-performance contracts, it is going to be critical that we can show that we have excellent quality. We know what is the drivers of our quality, and when we do have an area that we slip in, we know what to look for to improve it. So we're waiting for, and you don't have to volunteer on the phone, but if you would just, if you're interested, if you would shoot an email to Arlene. Again, I'd like to no more than 10, probably a minimum of 6, just a small group that like to dig into data, like to do analysis, that are willing to work on this.
Thanks, Vicki. Are there any comments or questions? Pam and Steve, anything else you want to say on this? And everyone, please reach out to me to volunteer for this project. It's very important.
The only thing I would say is that it may not be you who attend this meeting in particular. Maybe you have somebody else in your organization, or it's the MDS nurse. If you have somebody that really loves to dig into that kind of analysis, I just say you can volunteer someone else from your organization with their permission. It doesn't have to be you.
Somebody who's not on our contact list right now, who would be best to look at this?
Correct. So there could be an MDS nurse that really understands the data, but she's not the person that's entering the data. So in that case, you know, it may be talking to that person and saying, are you willing to help?
So the volunteers aren't limited to the people on this call or that are in our email. We're really looking for people that have a passion, let's say, for the numbers and what they mean to us from a quality perspective.
Well, thank you. I look forward to hearing from you on volunteers for this project, as well as those for sharing the best practices as we go forward. Moving on the agenda, Pam is going to do a summary of the PDPM presentation that was done by Health Dimensions. You should have received a copy of that full presentation from me today, as well as the Leading Age Ohio comments. Now, I'm on the SNF AL subcommittee, That's why I have those comments. I did ask for permission to share those comments with you as they were finalized yesterday by the deadline. Some of you have been able to open it. Some of you have not been able to open it. If you cannot open that document, either the Health Dimensions one or the Leading Age Ohio one, please contact me and I will send you out a new document. I'm not sure what is happening. Just like this presentation that Pam is doing, it's coming from the email. When I saved it, I was not able to open it either. So I know these things happen. So without further ado, I do have Pam's PowerPoint on the screen, and Pam's going to talk about a summary of PDPM, which will be affecting all of us. And Pam, just let me know as you want me to advance the slides.
All right. And I would say I was one of the people that couldn't open the leading age comments, Arlene. So if you want to add color commentary as we go through, if something sparks an idea in your head that's from that document, where we're asking for clarification, or we have something to say, that would be great if you could add a little bit to the conversation. This whole Health Dimensions overview took a little over an hour, and so really I want to stress I'm just looking at highlights. I'm just trying to get us used to what this new system will probably look like. So you can see right now the source still is our proposed federal rule from the end of April. We will not have any finalized rules until CMS first had to close the 60-day comment window, which was yesterday, and then they will, at their discretion, be making changes or modifications to the proposed rule, and at the earliest, we'll have that in August. All right, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the good news is, unlike the previous proposal, this is budget neutral, and that means that CMS is going to keep the whole pool of dollars that they're currently distributing through the RUG system. They are redistributing that to SNFs, but at 100% of the current pool. So it is budget neutral. And the other good thing is we still have 15 months to prepare for the changes. So the changes we're going to look at today, one, are just proposed, so it'll be changing slightly as we get the final rule. And then they don't go into effect until October 1st of 2019. All right, next slide. So a number of key changes, and that is now your functional status, and you've seen CMS adding functional quality metrics into, as a result of the Impact Act, into our nursing home compare and our QRP data. And so their intent really is that we should be paying providers based on the functional status at the beginning and end of the stay, that their status should drive therapy, not the number of minutes that we actually provide. And so that's a big change. We haven't had a change like this in 22 years, back to 1996. ICD-10 coding, to some extent, will be to understand that coding better will drive the intensity of the medical needs. So we might need to have a deeper knowledge of ICD-10. And there's more emphasis on nursing, and CMS says there will be better payments for medically complex patients. So if ICD-10 is the underlying coding that's pushing payment, we need to understand that. They've also taken the payment system and they're really incentivizing us as providers the way that managed care has just been pushing shorter and shorter lengths of stay on us. Well, the government's finally got around to doing that too, but they're actually going to dangle a carrot out there for us. And shorter lengths of stay now, 15 days or less, will have higher per diem rates than longer stays. And then there's two areas where the per diem rates will really vary as the stay goes on. So therapy per diems start to decline by 2% per day after day 20, and non-therapy ancillary costs begin to decline after day 3. And they drop, after day 3, they drop to about a third of the per diem that they will be giving us on the first 3 days. And then there's also an underlying base rate, and the only change on the base rate, you're either urban or rural. All right, next slide, please.
Pam, just one comment on the ICD-10 coding that is on the Leading Age Ohio comments, and that is that we, as in long-term care, are not often well skilled on ICD-10 coding. So that will be an area that we will need to become skilled on. And there will be some challenges in that area, and time and dollars involved in us getting skilled on that coding. So there are comments related to that.
So just to piggyback on that, if you happen to have a home health agency, they do have to know the ICD-10 coding inside and out, and so they actually may be a help as we move forward.
Absolutely. Those that have that may be a huge benefit. Good point.
Okay, all right, next slide. Okay, we're just going to stay very high level and just trying to introduce the new concepts. So I really liked what Health Dimensions had done. So right now, in the green on this slide, that's our current PPS system that we've had with some tweaks back to 1996. So there is a therapy component, a nursing component, and non-case mix. So they are adding a little bit of complexity. In fact, they're doubling the complexity, moving from 3 components now to 6 components. So they are breaking out our therapies into PT, so physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech language therapies, as well as then a non-therapy ancillary factor, plus nursing, plus a non-case mix adjustment, which for the most part is really a room and board factor. So the first 5 of the circles on this slide are driven each by their own case mix system based on MDS data, and really it's driving down to individual patient characteristics. So that PDPM, that patient-driven payment model. So these case mixes will be, quite different for each patient. So they're trying to get down to that next level of specificity. I hope I said that right. All right, next slide, unless there's questions on this one. So now this takes those 6 circles that we were just talking about and helps us better visualize how they're going to calculate our rates. And so there is a separate base rate to the left here running for all 6 components. They're going to multiply that then by the middle column here, the case mix index. And now there's a separate case mix index for 5 of the 6 components. The non-case mix base rate on the bottom has no case mix adjuster. And I'll talk a little bit more about the CMI now. The PT, the physical therapy and OT, they will have 16 different categories that make up their case mix. The speech therapy will have 12 groups that make up their case mix. So when they're adding all this complexity, they decided that they'd take away some of the nursing home case mix complexity, and they are taking the 43 RUGS groups and collapsing those into 25 groups. And then finally, the last case mix adjustment, that non-therapy ancillary cost has 6 groupings in its CMI. So we'll have 28 plus 32. We're still going to have an immense number of categories that we need to look at outside of the nursing therapy case mix now. Then finally, all the way to the right here, after we've looked at the base rate, we multiply it by the case mix index, then PT, OT, and then that non-therapy ancillary have that further adjustment factor. And that adjustment factor will be based on the particular day in the stay that occurs. And that's it for this slide. Are there any questions or comments?
And I am monitoring the chat window, so if you have questions or comments, please feel free to reach out. And remember that we did provide to you the full presentation from Health Dimensions on this. And Pam is summarizing the highlights today, as it would be too lengthy to do all of it in this meeting.
All right. Well, I think we can move to the next slide that I selected. So we're starting to look at some of the larger categories, not all of the categories here, but there's both a PDPM clinical category, and you can see that on the left-hand side. And then it crosswalks then into a collapse PT-OT clinical category, and there are subcategories under these as well. So we're going to only 4 clinical categories in PT and OT, and then that's one component is the clinical category, and then I'm not ready to move to the next slide, but the next slide will also then talk about your function score. So this is what the clinical scores will be based on. So they certainly are collapsing these. One thing on the clinical category that's different and that's outside a category is that they have, if you happen to treat AIDS patients, there is an 18% increase in that clinical category group, but it's separate from what we're looking at here. Okay, so moving then to the next slide from the clinical categories that will drive payment, then this is new for us, and they've been building on this from the IMPACT Act, and that's not only now are we reporting on Section GG, and we've been looking at the clinical outcomes from these function scores. Now it's going to be the basis for our payment for PT, OT, and for the nursing components. So this is Section GG. And so right now, if you're not the MDS nurse, and you may not know this, right now Section G is what pays us on ADLs, and it's really concentrating on the 4 late loss ADLs: transfers, eating, toileting, and bed mobility. So they are really expanding the look here and incorporating early loss ADLs. And so you can see that there's really 2 different categories here within Section GG. That's how you do with self-care, the top 3, and then the remainder are really looking at your mobility and then that score, which can range then from 0 to 4. Any questions about that? Or comments?
I'm just wondering if many facilities are seeing this information for the first time, or some of them have been studying it for a while. So you can let us know in the comments. I know sometimes it can happen either way, and that's why there may be few questions today, but there may be a lot more as we go on.
Okay. And this is subject to change, so we can't get too excited about it. So then I want to just show a map, and this is showing us the darker the color, the higher the number of providers in that state that are going to lose money. So the highest is Texas by itself, where 600 facilities will be losing payment, but Ohio is in the dark green there. So that means that it's in this key 500 to 599 facilities, and we have about 950-ish on any given day. So a great majority of the nursing homes in Ohio, if they did nothing else, if they just let their claims roll in as they do today, will lose money. And so I show this slide simply to say, well, no one wants to lose money. We already don't have enough reimbursement from our viewpoint. And so it's really a way of saying, hey, the state's here, the darker the color, the greater the probability that we've got to change the way we do business. That's what it means to me. It's an opportunity to change the way we do business and capitalize on these changes and be successful. Okay. All right, and then moving to, oh, you already did. So Arlene already said the comment period ended yesterday. The earliest that they will finalize the rule is in August. In particular, Health Dimensions thought that they were, that early comments are looking to look at how much concurrent and group therapy we might be able to do now that the emphasis isn't on maximizing the number of minutes and it's really on functional outcomes. They want to see if some of that concurrent and group therapy limitations can be lifted, so that we can drive more therapy, getting to an earlier result. And then they also said that there are likely to be comments in particular based on interrupted stay and interim payment adjustments, and these are technical terms that they have in the notice. And so on the interrupted stay and interim payment adjustment, they are now proposing to change the way we complete the MDS. So right now we have scheduled and unscheduled MDS completions. So right now the scheduled MDS completions would be at 5 days, 14 days, 30, 60, 90 days. And then we also have a number of other things that are not scheduled that will trigger the need for an MDS assessment. And that's start of therapy, other Medicare required assessments, end of therapy, and change of therapy, and also significant change in status. So right now we have a lot of different scheduled and unscheduled MDS completions. They are proposing that to drop that down to 3, a 5-day assessment, and that 5th day assessment will drive the entire caseload. Then there's an IPA, an interim payment assessment. It's still comprised of the 5-day MDS setup in section NP, but it is only triggered in the following cases. A change in at least one first-tier classification criteria, or a change where the resident is expected to not be able to return to the original clinical status within 14 days. So that may not even be triggered during the stay. And finally, they are proposing that there be a discharge assessment still. So that is supposed to drop our MDS coding, and they've actually said that that change in the assessment pattern should save the average SNF, that's about 80 beds, $12,000 per year. And I would say earlier we talked about the need for that ICD-10 coding. I'd say that we're going to spend that or more learning ICD-10 coding if that remains in the rule. And finally, just for those of us who have really had heavy focus on therapy, and in particular ultra high therapy, we really need to think about really focusing on the clinical needs and the comorbidities of our patients. And we may need to change our operational focus to do that. And we may need more clinical training to bring our folks up to a higher level of clinical functioning. And then also, we really need to think through our length of stay. I know we're already being challenged from that perspective from managed care. And so that might be easier for us to wrap our heads around right now, is now the government's asking us to decrease length of stay as well. And our MDS coding specialists will be more important than ever. And that is the 20-minute version of the 200+ pages of regulations.
Thank you, Pam. Are there any questions and comments for Pam? You can use the chat window or unmute yourself. We really do want to take any questions you have. We will use these quality committee meetings to continue to update on this because we know with the comment period being yesterday, with it possibly being finalized early August, possibly our August meeting, we will make sure to have this on the agenda if we have some finalization by then, so that we can all go forward, because this is something we all have to do. I mean, it's not optional. We're going to have to do what it says we're going to need to do, and we're going to need to spend some time learning it and putting things in place in our organizations and probably getting additional training. Any comments?
I do want to plug, I saw today that Leading Age Ohio is having a webinar, and I think it's almost an hour and a half or 2 hours that they posted that they're having on PDPM. So I would say, you know, listen as many different times to as many different people as possible to really start getting a fully rounded view of how this system will affect us.
Mm-hmm. And since there were so many people who could not open the Leading Age comments, I will probably just resend it to everyone by forwarding the email that they sent me rather than saving it and forwarding that, because that may be what's interfering with it. So look for another email and look at their comments. It says, does OASN Leading Age have any plans in place to offer ICD-10 coding classes to our MDS nurses? I would think that would be coming from Leading Age, would be my thoughts. I have not heard that conversation, but I would think that that's probably going to be forthcoming from Leading Age, because they are going to provide anything they can to help the facilities be successful. Steve or Pam or Vicki, have you heard anything?
No, I haven't heard anything, Arlene, but what I would share with the OASN Quality Committee is that Katie Smith in our office is a certified billing coder. And so if we needed to, from an OASN perspective, we could put some kind of a training together based off of that. And obviously we have, resources in other areas that we can tap into to do some ICD-10, coding seminars on specifically for long-term care. So Pam and Vicki, we can talk about that from a board perspective and then maybe put something together.
Okay.
That sounds good. Are there any questions or comments before we move on? We're almost to the top of the hour, and in respect of your time, we just have really one or two other things on the agenda. I'll keep monitoring the chat window. I do want to mention that, as all of you are aware, CPMT is going to be doing our data analytics now. And we do have a meeting this Friday to discuss some new reports that they've come up with. So as soon as we get a chance to look at those reports and share them with your quality board chairs and make sure that they are going to work for us, then we will be sharing those with you. So I'm assuming that we'll be sharing those data analytics reports with you at the July Quality Committee meeting. So for those of you who have asked when they're coming, I wanted to get that information to you. Are there any questions or comments on that? We have 59 people on the line, but it's a quiet 59 people. We know you're busy. We try to make sure that these meetings provide you with information that you need to know. So we thank you for your time and participation. We want to remind you, we need volunteers for the task force. We need volunteers to present best practices. We need all of you to get your data at 100% compliant for your April, because it's going to be time to enter May soon. We hope that you all have a safe and happy holiday coming up next weekend. Pam, Vicki, Steve, any other comments or questions before we adjourn?
Happy 4th of July.
Same for me.
Well, thank you, everyone. Look for that new document coming over from Leading Age on their comments. I'll send it out after this meeting. Thank you very much. This meeting was recorded, so you can request a copy. You can also watch it. It will be posted on the member section of the OASN website. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Arlene.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.